Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today's my topic is the fertilization. These are the objectives of the fertilization. We should know the definition of fertilization, what are the results of the fertilization, and different phases of the fertilization, and detail of phases and some clinicals regarding this fertilization. This diagram shows the ovary and fallopian tube. As we have already know that this is ovary and this is the cortex of the ovary where oogenesis occur, and this is the mature graphene follicle showing the ovulation. The ovulated material is including the secondary oocyte. This red color is of zona pellucida and the corona radiata cells. These corona radiata cells before ovulation they are called the cumulocephalous, and the remaining material which remains in the cortex of the ovary is called the corpus luteum. This is the fallopian tube, as you know the parts of the fallopian tube, and this is the ampulla. This is the most widest part of the fallopian tube where the fertilization occurs. So first of all, the definition of the fertilization: the process by which the male and female gamete fuse. It occurs in the ampullary region of the uterine tube. This is the most widest part of the tube and is close to the ovary. Spermatozoa may remain viable in female reproductive tract for several days. Only 1% of the sperm deposited in the vagina enters the cervix, where they may survive for many hours. As you know, the female reproductive organ, the vagina is the most nearest part from which the sperm enter, and from vagina it passes into the uterus, and from uterus, here should be the uterus they pass into the fallopian tube, and this is the isthmus part of the fallopian tube. Here this sperm wait for the chemoattractant released by this ovulated ovum. When this so the question is asked, how the sperm come from the vagina, uterus into the isthmus. This is facilitated by some movements of its own sperm, and the some movements are added by the contraction of the smooth muscles of the uterus and the uterine tube. So when it reaches into the isthmus, it stops its movement, and after release of the ovulated ovum, this ovum releases some chemoattractant, so the sperm from isthmus part comes into the ampullary region where the fertilization occurs. So the movement of the sperm from the cervix to the uterine tube occurs by the muscular contraction of the uterus and uterine tube and by their own propulsion. The trip from the cervix to the cervix is the part of the narrowest portion of the uterus to oviduct is another name of the uterine tube, require a minimum of 2 to 7 hours, and after reaching the isthmus the sperm become less motile and cease their migration. At ovulation, sperm again becomes motile, perhaps because of the chemoattractant produced by the cumulus cells surrounding the egg. So the sperm swim to the ampulla where the fertilization usually occurs. सबसे पहले हम डायग्राम में देखें what are the phases of the fertilization. These are the corona radiata cells, and this red color line is the zona pellucida, which is the glycoprotein layer, and this is the secondary oocyte. When the sperm comes, it should be passes from two phases. Number one, the capacitation, capacitation and the acrosomal reaction to acquire their capability. What is capacitation? Capacitation is a process by which the glycoprotein removed from the head of the sperm. इस हेड के आगे बहुत सारी ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन्स लगी हुई होती हैं जो ये रिमूव होती हैं. तो दिस प्रोसेस इज कॉल्ड द कैपेसिटेशन. Okay, so you know the definition of the capacitation regarding the, which is important for regarding point of examination point of view. During this time, a glycoprotein coat and the seminal plasma proteins are removed from the plasma membrane that overlies the acrosomal region of the spermatozoa. This is the definition for capacitation. So capacitation is a period of conditioning in the female reproductive. So where the capacitation occur? Capacitation occur in female reproductive tract and lasts approximately 7 hours. मतलब ये process कितने देर तक चलता है? 7 hours तक. Much of this conditioning which occurs in the uterine tube entails epithelial interaction between the sperm and the mucosal surface of the tube. ज़्यादातर ये कैपेसिटेशन कहाँ पे होती है? यूट्राइन ट्यूब में होती है, जहाँ पे इसकी यूट्राइन ट्यूब के एपिथेलियम है सिंपल कॉलमनर सिलिएटेड एपिथेलियम. तो उससे इंट्रैक्शन में ये सारी ग्लाइकोप्रोटीन्स, सेमिनल प्लाज्मा प्रोटीन्स रिमूव हो जाती हैं. ओनली कैपेसिटेटेड स्पर्म कैन पास थ्रू द कोरोनरी डेटा सेल्स एंड अंडरगो द एक्रोसोमल रिएक्शन. यानी कि अगर ये कैपेसिटेटेड नहीं होगा तो ये कोरोना रेडिएटा को क्रॉस नहीं कर सकेगा. Now the fertilization, the spermatozoa are not able to fertilize the oocyte immediately upon arrival in the female genital tract, but must undergo capacitation and acrosomal reaction. Now the phases of the fertilization. Number 1, first phase. डायग्राम में देखो किसको पेनिट्रेट करेगा. अब कोरोना रेडिएटा को तो करके आ गया क्योंकि कैपेसिटेशन से पास होके आ गया. Now the first phase should be the passage or fusion with the zona pellucida. So sperm penetrate of corona radiata, first phase after the passing through the capacitation, and second phase sperm binding and penetration to the zona pellucida, third phase fusion of the sperm and the oocyte cell membrane. So first phase will be the passing through the corona radiata, and the second passing or penetration the zona pellucida. Third will be the fusion of the with the membrane of the oocyte. Now the details of these phases. Number 1, the penetration of the corona radiata. About 200 to 300 million sperms normally deposited in the female genital tract. Only 300 to 500 reaches the, उसमें मिलियन है ऊपर क्या है 200 to 300 मिलियन, और पास कितने हो रहे हैं 300 to 500 reaches the site of fertilization. What is the site of fertilization mean? Ampulla. Only one of these fertilizes the egg. Capacitated sperm passes freely through the corona radiata. So in phase 2, penetration of the zona pellucida. Zona pellucida is a glycoprotein layer. I have already told you it is secreted by the ovum itself and by the granulosa cells, and it surrounds the ovum and facilitate and maintain the sperm binding, induces the acrosomal reaction. Both binding and the acrosome reaction are mediated by the ligand ZP3. These are the receptors which are present on the zona pellucida. A zona protein. This ZP3 is a zona protein. Release of the acrosomal enzyme. So when the sperm bind with the or penetrate the zona pellucida releases an enzyme acrosine which is present in the एक्रोसोमल कैप ऑफ द स्पर्म। मैं आपको दिखाती हूँ। यहाँ पे ये डबल लेयर, ये हेड ऑफ द स्पर्म है, इसमें न्यूक्लियस पड़ा हुआ है, एंड द हेड इज कवर्ड बाय डबल लेयर्ड स्ट्रक्चर कॉल्ड द एक्रोसोमल कैप। व्हेन दिस acrosomal cap comes in contact with the zona pellucida, the outer layer of the acrosomal caps disintegrates, and between these two layers there is presence of the acrosin enzyme. So when outer layer disintegrates, the acrosin enzyme release, and this acrosin enzyme causes the alteration of the permeability of the zona pellucida. Because of the acrosin enzyme, when the permeability changes, then this can cross the zona pellucida. ठीक है, जब तक इसमें अगर एक्रोसिन एंजाइम रिलीज नहीं होगा तो ये जोना पेलिसिडा को क्रॉस नहीं कर सकता। ठीक है, अब इसने जोना पेलिसिडा को क्रॉस किया। ठीक है, तो फर्टिलाइजेशन में